The chill wasn't from the restaurant's air conditioning. It was a cold that started in the pit of my stomach and spread through my veins like ice water. It froze my breath in my lungs, my feet to the plush, crimson carpet. A moment ago I was celebrating my 34th birthday. Now I was a statue in a tragedy of my own making. The sticky, sweet scent of cranberry filled the air around me, a sickeningly festive perfume. It dripped, a slow, taunting metronome of my humiliation, down the bodice of my dress. A dress I had saved for, a $4,000 silk sheath the color of a twilight sky, now stained a vulgar, bloody red. Each drop felt like a second of my life with them, seeping into the fabric, ruining it from the inside out. My sister-in-law, Clara, held the empty crystal glass, her lips pulled back in a smirk that was all sharp angles and cruel satisfaction. Her voice, usually a high-pitched whine, was low and venomous. "Oops," she'd said, the word a perfect polished lie. Then she leaned in, her breath smelling of expensive champagne and something rotten. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." The words struck me harder than a physical blow. They were meant to. They were the culmination of a decade of carefully aimed insults, of whispered condescension and open contempt. Across the table my mother-in-law, Lauren, didn't even try to hide her delight. She brought her manicured hands together in a single sharp clap. It wasn't loud, but in the sudden ringing silence that had fallen over our corner of the opulent restaurant, it was a gunshot. A signal of her victory. My eyes, burning with unshed tears, flew to my husband. To Carter. My rock, my love, the man who had promised to protect me. He sat there, his handsome face impassive for a moment, before a slow, proud smile spread across his lips. He wasn't looking at me, the woman he had married, the mother of his child. He was looking at his sister, his mother. He was looking at his team. And he was proud. Proud of their cruelty. Proud of my public degradation. In that single soul-shattering moment the man I loved died. He was replaced by a stranger, a monster wearing his face. The only sound that broke the spell was a small gasp beside me. My daughter, my sweet 10-year-old Danielle, her face pale, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding that no child should ever possess. They all watched me, this trinity of vipers, waiting for me to shatter. Waiting for the tears, the apologies, the retreat into shame they had so expertly engineered. They expected me to crumble. They saw me as nothing more than a charity case Carter had elevated, a pretty, penniless girl they had to tolerate. But none of them, not a single one, knew the truth. They didn't know who I really was. They didn't know about the fortress I had built around my heart, brick by painstaking brick. They didn't know about the secrets I kept locked away behind a smile they mistook for weakness. They thought this was the end of me. But as I stood there, frozen and dripping, a fire began to burn where the ice had been. A cold, clean, calculating rage. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. This night, this dress, this single perfect act of humiliation. It wouldn't be my downfall. It would be theirs. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The car ride home was a masterclass in suffocating silence. The interior of Carter's Mercedes, usually a space of comfort and luxury, felt like a tomb. The smell of cranberry had clung to me, a constant, cloying reminder of what had happened. I had tried to clean the dress in the restaurant's lavish bathroom, scrubbing at the stain with a damp cloth until the delicate silk threatened to tear, but it was no use. The dark red had soaked deep into the pale blue fabric, a permanent scar. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. Each light was a life, a story, a world away from the cold prison I was trapped in. Beside me, Carter drove, his knuckles white on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He hadn't said a word since we left the restaurant. He didn't need to. His pride was a palpable force in the car, radiating from him in waves. He was satisfied. In the back seat, Danielle was unnaturally still. She hadn't said a word either, but her silence was different from her father's. Hers was the heavy, watchful silence of a child who had seen too much. I could feel her eyes on the back of my head, full of a fierce, protective love that was both my anchor and my shame. She shouldn't have to protect me. Finally, as we turned onto our quiet, tree-lined street, Carter spoke. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice he used when he was about to explain why I was wrong. "You have to admit, Crystal, You were being a little sensitive tonight, he began. I turned my head slowly, my neck stiff. Sensitive. The word was a dry whisper. Clara deliberately poured a drink on me, Carter. Your mother applauded. And you smiled. He sighed, a long put-upon sound. Oh, come on. It was a joke. Claire can be clumsy, you know that. You made it awkward for everyone by overreacting. You caused a scene. I caused a scene. The disbelief was so sharp it almost choked me. By standing there while your family assaulted me on my birthday? Assaulted? Don't be so dramatic. He pulled into our driveway, the engine cutting out with a soft purr, plunging us into an even deeper silence. He turned to face me, his face a mask of patronizing patience. They're just traditional. They have high standards. They just want to make sure you fit in, that you represent the family name properly. That dress. It was a little much, wasn't it? A bit flashy. Maybe Clara was just trying to tone it down a bit. In her own way. Every word was a small, precise stab to my heart. He wasn't just defending them. He was justifying them. He was telling me that their cruelty was my fault. The dress he had praised this morning, calling me his goddess, was now flashy. My pain was an overreaction. My humiliation was a lesson I needed to learn. The love I thought I had for him, the last dying embers of it, turned to ash. There was nothing left but a cold, hard void. I see, I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. I had to drain myself of feeling, or I would have shattered right there in the passenger seat. I got out of the car without another word and went straight to Danielle's room. I helped her change into her pajamas, my movements mechanical. She was quiet, her small face tight with worry. As I tucked her into bed, her little hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Mommy, she whispered, her eyes huge in the dim light of her bedside lamp. Are you okay? I'm okay, sweetie, I lied, stroking her hair. Just a little tired. They're mean, she said, her voice trembling with a child's righteous fury. Daddy let them be mean to you. A fresh wave of pain washed over me. He saw it. She saw it all so clearly. I know, baby, I murmured. But we're going to be okay. You and me. She hesitated, then bit her lip. I did something. What did you do, honey? She reached for her small tablet on her nightstand. Her fingers, nimble and quick, tapped on the screen. She opened a locked folder, entered a passcode, and then turned the screen to me. It was a video. The video from the restaurant. She had propped her tablet up against the flower arrangement and hit record, just as she always did when she wanted to make a memory movie of a special occasion. But this was no memory to cherish. The angle was perfect. It captured everything. Clara's sneering face, the deliberate tilt of her glass, the dark splash of juice. Lauren's sharp, cruel clap. And Carter's proud, sickening smile. The audio was shockingly clear, picking up Clara's venomous whisper. Now you look as cheap as you really are. My breath hitched. I looked from the screen to my daughter's determined face. She wasn't just a witness. She was an archivist of their crimes. They shouldn't be able to pretend it didn't happen, she said, her voice small but firm. They shouldn't get away with it. In that moment, my love for my daughter swelled into something fierce and vast. A tidal wave of emotion that pushed away all the pain and filled me with a terrifying, absolute clarity. He was right. They wouldn't get away with it. Not anymore. I kissed her forehead. You are the smartest, bravest girl in the entire world, I told her, my voice thick with emotion. Now get some sleep. Mommy has some work to do. After she was asleep, I went to our master bedroom. Carter was already in bed, scrolling through his phone, oblivious. He didn't even look up as I entered. I walked past him into the large walk-in closet. At the very back, behind a row of winter coats, was a false panel. I pressed a specific spot and it clicked open, revealing a keypad. I typed in a 16-digit alphanumeric code. A section of the wall slid silently sideways, revealing a small, hidden room. This was my sanctuary. My secret. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. No soft carpets or family photos. Just cold, clean lines, the hum of powerful computers, and a wall of monitors displaying streams of data, global stock tickers, encrypted communication channels, financial analytics. This was my world, the one they knew nothing about. They saw Crystal, the quiet, unassuming wife from a humble background. The girl Carter had saved from a life of mediocrity. They had no idea that for the past 10 years, I had been operating under a digital pseudonym, Nemesis. I was a ghost in the machine, a highly successful and utterly anonymous day trader and investor. I started with a small inheritance my grandmother had left me, a secret I had never shared with Carter. I had taught myself to code, to analyze markets, to see patterns no one else could. I had grown that small seed of money into a fortune that would make Carter's family wealth look like pocket change. I had done it as a precaution, a safety net. I had seen the subtle condescension in his family from the beginning, the way they looked down on my background. I had hoped I would never need it. I had hoped Carter's love was real, that it would be enough to shield me. I was a fool. But the fool was gone now. Nemesis was in control. I sat down in the ergonomic chair, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face. I slipped on a headset and initiated a secure, encrypted call. "Nemesis online," I said, my voice cold and steady. A synthesized voice replied on the other end. "Aries. Standing by. It's been a while. Is it time?" Aries was my silent partner, a legendary reclusive hacker I had contracted years ago. He handled the parts of my operation that required a deeper, darker dive into the digital world. He knew nothing about my real life, only that I was Nemesis, and I paid exceptionally well for his loyalty and skills. I took a deep, steadying breath, the image of Carter's smiling face burning behind my eyes. "It's time, Aries," I said. "I want you to begin a full-spectrum deep dive analysis. The target is Sterling Enterprises and its primary shareholders. Carter Sterling, Lauren Sterling, and Clara Sterling. I want everything. Financial records, private correspondence, hidden assets, offshore accounts, personal secrets. Every skeleton in every closet. I want the leverage to burn their entire world to the ground." There was a pause on the other end, and then the synthesized voice spoke again, a hint of what might have been digital curiosity in its tone. "Consider it done, Nemesis. Welcome back." The call ended. I turned to my central monitor and pulled up the video Danielle had taken. I uploaded it to a secure triple encrypted server. It was Exhibit A. The catalyst. I took off my ruined dress, letting it fall to the floor in a crumpled heap. I stood there for a moment in the cool, humming darkness of my secret room, no longer Crystal Sterling, the humiliated wife. I was Nemesis, and I was coming for them all. This wasn't just revenge. It was a reckoning. The days that followed were a performance. I was the grieving wife, my heart broken by a family squabble. I was quiet, withdrawn, and pliable. I apologized to Carter for overreacting. I let him believe he had successfully put me back in my place. At a family dinner the following Sunday, I even offered a stilted, hollow apology to Clara and Lauren for making my birthday celebration so awkward. Clara lapped it up, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "It's fine, Crystal," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We all know you can be a bit emotional." Lauren just nodded, a tight, smug little smile on her lips. She thought she had one. They all did. They moved through their lives with the blissful arrogance of the untouchable, never once looking over their shoulders. They never imagined the predator that was now stalking them from the shadows of their own home. My first target was Clara. Clara's entire identity was built on her social standing. She was the chair of 3 different high society charity committees, her face a regular fixture in the society pages. Her life was a carefully curated Instagram feed of galas, designer clothes, and powerful friends. To destroy Clara, I didn't need to touch her money. I needed to shatter her reputation. Aries delivered the first batch of data within 48 hours. It was a digital treasure trove of indiscretion. Claire was sloppy. She used the same weak password for everything and conducted her most secret affairs over unsecured text messages. Among the mountain of data, I found the perfect weapon. Claire was having an affair. It wasn't just any affair. Her lover was a man named Julian Vance, a celebrated art curator and, more importantly, the husband of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was the undisputed queen of the city's social scene, a woman with old money credentials that made the Sterlings look like new arrivals. She was also the head of the selection committee for the prestigious annual Woman of the Year Charity Award, an award Clara desperately coveted. But the real poison was in the details. In their texts, Clara and Julian viciously mocked Eleanor, calling her a fossil and a clueless relic. Clara had also been feeding Julian inside information from her charity committees, helping him secure lucrative contracts to supply art for their events. with a hefty kickback going into a secret bank account under Clara's maiden name. It was a cocktail of adultery, betrayal, and fraud. The stage for Clara's downfall would be the annual Blossom Gala, the city's most exclusive charity event, just 2 weeks away. It was the centerpiece of the social calendar, and Eleanor Vance was the guest of honor. While playing the part of the dutiful wife at home, Nemesis worked tirelessly. I created a series of anonymous, encrypted email accounts. I built a digital paper trail, carefully leaking bits and pieces of information to specific people. I sent an anonymous tip to a gossip columnist I knew was a rival of the one who usually covered Clara's events. I sent a carefully redacted copy of the bank statement to a junior board member of the charity, someone I knew was ambitious and jealous of Clara's power. I was planting seeds in a garden of vipers, knowing they would do the work for me. The night of the Blossom Gala arrived. Carter, puffed up with pride at my seeming subservience, escorted me into the grand ballroom. The air was thick with perfume and the sound of clinking champagne glasses. Clara was in her element, flitting from group to group, her laughter loud and artificial. She was wearing a garish yellow dress, looking like a venomous canary. I maintained my role. I was quiet, demure, clinging to Carter's arm. But my eyes missed nothing. I watched as the gossip columnist cornered a well-known socialite, their heads bent together in conspiratorial whispers. I saw the junior board member in a hushed, intense conversation with 2 other committee members, their eyes darting nervously towards Clara. The whispers started as a low hum, a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Then they grew. People started looking at Clara differently. The smiles she received became tighter, the embraces less sincere. She was too self-absorbed to notice at first, but then I saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes. The groups of people she approached would suddenly fall silent. The tipping point came when she tried to join Eleanor Vance's circle. Eleanor, a formidable woman with eyes like chips of ice, turned to face her. The smile on her face was a terrifying thing, all teeth and no warmth. "Clara, darling," Eleanor said, her voice carrying across the sudden lull in conversation. "I've been hearing the most fascinating stories about your philanthropic efforts, and your very, very close collaboration with my husband." The color drained from Clara's face. She stammered, trying to form a denial, but the words wouldn't come. The people around them took a collective step back, creating a circle of judgment around her. Just then, as if on cue, the gossip columnist's phone buzzed, and then another and another. A special edition digital blast from the column had just gone out. The headline was explosive: "Charity Queen's Dirty Secrets. Adultery, fraud, and betrayal rock the Blossom Gala." Clara's phone buzzed in her clutch. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out. I watched her face crumble as she read the words, as she saw screenshots of her own text messages to Julian displayed for the world to see. A choked, horrified sound escaped her lips. She was no longer the center of attention. She was the object of scorn. Her meticulously crafted world of social perfection had been set on fire, and she was burning in the center of it. She fled the ballroom, her canary yellow dress a blur of cowardice, followed by the stares and whispers of everyone she had ever tried to impress. Carter stood beside me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine for an explanation. I just looked at him, my expression one of wide-eyed, innocent confusion. "Oh my," I said softly, a perfect imitation of shock. "Poor Clara. Who could have done something so awful?" He looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but then dismissed it. How could I? Quiet, simple, penniless Crystal? The thought was absurd to him. He was so blinded by his own arrogance he couldn't see the wolf he'd been sleeping next to. As we drove home in another silent car ride, this one filled with his bewildered anger instead of his smug satisfaction, I felt the first sweet taste of victory. It wasn't a hot, fiery feeling. It was cold, sharp, and utterly delicious. 1 down. 2 to go. My next target was Lauren. If Clara's power was social, Lauren's was rooted in the family legacy. She was the matriarch, the keeper of the Sterling name and fortune. She viewed Sterling Enterprises not just as a business, but as an extension of her own bloodline. Its success was her success, its reputation her reputation. To hurt Lauren, I had to strike at the heart of her kingdom. Ares's data dive on the company was a revelation. On the surface, Sterling Enterprises was a respectable, if somewhat stagnant real estate development firm. But beneath the polished veneer, it was a mess of Lauren's vanity projects, bad investments disguised as strategic acquisitions, and a deeply flawed accounting system that she personally manipulated. The biggest vulnerability was a project called the Avalon, a luxury waterfront condo development that was Lauren's pet project. It was millions over budget and years behind schedule, a financial black hole draining the company's resources. Lauren had been cooking the books for years, hiding the true extent of the losses by shifting assets and liabilities between shell corporations. It was fraud on a massive scale. This was my entry point. My nemesis persona began its assault. I started by using a network of offshore accounts to anonymously buy up the debt Sterling Enterprises had taken on to finance the Avalon. I became their biggest silent creditor. They had no idea that the faceless European investment firm tightening the screws was being operated from a hidden room in their own son's house. Next, I started a campaign of psychological warfare. I used Aries to orchestrate a series of unfortunate events, designed to make Lauren feel like she was losing control. A crucial zoning permit for the Avalon was suddenly lost in the city's digital archives, setting them back months. The lead architect on the project received a too-good-to-be-true offer from a rival firm, an offer I had secretly manufactured and funded and resigned overnight. A series of anonymous, targeted leaks began to appear on obscure financial blogs, questioning the stability of Sterling Enterprises and hinting at creative accounting practices. At home I witnessed the fallout. Lauren, who was usually the picture of icy composure, became frayed and anxious. She was constantly on the phone, her voice a sharp, angry bark. The family dinners became tense, filled with arguments between Lauren and Carter about the company's mounting problems. "The bank is calling in the loan, Carter." I heard her shriek at him one evening from the study. "They won't extend our line of credit. And this blogger, Veritas, he knows things. Things no one should know." Carter, who had always deferred to his mother in business matters, was struggling to handle the pressure. He was in over his head, a puppet whose strings were being cut. The creepy element, as I'd come to think of it, was my special gift to Carter. I wanted to do more than just ruin him financially. I wanted to unravel him. I used my access to our home network to subtly manipulate his digital life. I would change the time of a meeting in his calendar by 15 minutes, making him perpetually late and flustered. I would delete a critical email from his inbox, then restore it hours later, making him think he'd imagined it. I used a voice modulator and a spoofed number to leave him cryptic one-word voicemails: Avalon, debt, Veritas. That would seem to come from a blocked ID. He started to look haunted. His confidence began to crack. He would pace the house at night, muttering to himself. He accused his secretary of incompetence, his business partners of betrayal. He was a man besieged by ghosts of my creation. One night he confronted me in the kitchen. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "Something is going on, Crystal. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Things are happening. Things I can't explain." I looked at him, my face a carefully constructed mask of concern. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Carter, honey, you're just under a lot of stress. With everything happening with Clara and now the business, maybe you should take some time off. Rest." My feigned concern was the cruelest cut of all. I was the source of his torment and I was positioning myself as his only solace. He was leaning on the very person who was pushing him off the cliff. He pulled me into a hug, his body trembling slightly. "You're right," he whispered into my hair. "You're the only one I can trust." I held him, my body stiff, my heart a stone in my chest. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The final piece of my plan against Lauren was ready. I had consolidated all the debt. I had spooked the market. I had driven her to the edge of desperation. Now it was time to push. I arranged for the European investment firm to make a formal offer to the Sterling Enterprises board. The offer was a hostile takeover. We would assume all the company's debt in exchange for a controlling majority of the shares. The price we offered was insultingly low, but given the company's precarious financial position, a position I had engineered, it was the only viable option to avoid a catastrophic bankruptcy that would wipe them out completely. An emergency board meeting was called. Lauren would have to go before her board of directors and admit that her pet project had ruined the company, and her only way out was to sell her family's legacy to a faceless entity for pennies on the dollar. It was a humiliation from which her pride would never recover. The night before the board meeting, I knew Carter would be working late with Lauren at the office, frantically trying to find a way out of the trap I had set. The house was quiet. It was just me and Danielle. We were in the kitchen making cookies, the warm, sweet smell a stark contrast to the coldness of my mission. Danielle looked up at me, her expression serious. "Is it almost over, Mom?" He knew. I had never told her the details, but she was smart. She saw the changes in her father, she heard the frantic phone calls, she felt the oppressive tension in the house. She knew I was fighting back. I knelt down in front of her. "It's almost over, sweetie," I said. "I promise." "Good," she said, nodding. "They deserve to be sad. Like they made you sad." Her simple, brutal honesty was a gut punch. This was the cost of their cruelty, not just my pain but my daughter's lost innocence. It steeled my resolve. This wasn't just for me. It was for her. It was to build a world for her where people like the Sterlings couldn't hurt us ever again. The next day, while the board meeting was in session, I sat in my hidden room, watching the stock ticker for Sterling Enterprises. I had a live, encrypted feed from a contact on the board, another seed I had planted months ago. I listened as Lauren's voice, strained and cracking, recommended that the board accept the takeover offer. I heard the vote. It was unanimous. The company my husband's family had built over 3 generations was now mine. Lauren had lost her kingdom. Carter had lost his inheritance. And they still had no idea who had taken it from them. The final act was yet to come. The most personal, the most painful. The complete and total destruction of Carter Sterling. And for that I had planned something special. The stage was already set. The annual Sterling Gala, a celebration of the company they no longer owned. The invitations had gone out months before the company's collapse, announcing the 50th annual Sterling Gala. After the takeover, Carter and Lauren had wanted to cancel it, to hide their shame. But the new owners, the board of my faceless European firm, following my precise, anonymous instructions, insisted it go on. It was to be a night of transition, they said. A celebration of the company's bold new future. It was the perfect stage for the final act of my revenge. In the week leading up to the gala, the last pieces of my plan clicked into place. Ares had unearthed Carter's deepest secret. It wasn't a mistress or a hidden debt. It was something far more damning to a man like him, a man who built his identity on a foundation of superiority. Years ago, before he met me, Carter had been responsible for a drunk driving accident. He had been behind the wheel, intoxicated, and had crashed his car, severely injuring his passenger, his best friend at the time. But no one ever knew. Lauren had used the family's power and money to make it all disappear. They paid the friend's family a fortune for their silence and medical care. They bribed officials to erase the police report. They had a junior employee of the company, a young man desperate for money, take the fall. That young man served 2 years in prison for a crime Carter had committed. This was the truth of the Sterling family. Not just cruel and arrogant but corrupt to their very core. The night of the gala, I stood before the mirror, not as Crystal, the timid wife, but as Nemesis in the flesh. I was not wearing a soft, flowing gown. I wore a custom-tailored suit of the deepest midnight blue, its lines sharp and unforgiving. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant style, and my makeup was bold and dramatic. I was not dressing to be admired. I was dressing for war. When I walked down the stairs, Carter stopped and stared. He had been nursing a glass of whiskey, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a ghost haunting the halls of his own life. "Crystal," he stammered. "You look different." "I feel different," I said, my voice cool and even. The ride to the hotel ballroom was silent. Carter was too lost in his own misery to speak. He was a broken man and I had broken him. A part of me, the woman who had once loved him, felt a flicker of pity. But the fire of my rage burned it away. He had watched me be humiliated with a smile on his face. He deserved no pity. We walked into the gala, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. Everyone knew the company had been sold. They were all there to witness the public downfall of the Sterling family. Lauren and Claire stood in a corner, looking like pale, wilted flowers, shunned by the very people who had once fawned over them. The evening's program began. The hotel's general manager gave a speech, then the chairman of the board, my puppet, went on stage. He spoke of the company's history and its exciting new chapter. Then he said the words I had been waiting for. And now, to speak on behalf of the new ownership group, please welcome the architect of this transition, the new controlling shareholder of Sterling Enterprises. A spotlight cut through the darkened room, not to the stage but to the center of the ballroom where I stood. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Carter looked at me, his face a canvas of utter confusion. Lauren and Clara stared, their mouths agape. I walked towards the stage, my heels clicking with sharp, deliberate purpose on the polished floor. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, but I only saw 3 faces: Carter's, Lauren's, and Clara's. Their confusion was slowly melting into dawning, horrified realization. I reached the podium and looked out at the silent, stunned crowd. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Crystal Sterling. Though some of you may know me by another name, Nemesis." A collective gasp went through the room. Lauren clutched her chest, her face ashen. "For 10 years I have been a member of the Sterling family. And for 10 years I have been treated as less than human. A charity case. A cheap thing to be ridiculed and discarded." I looked directly at Clara. "I've been called cheap in a $4,000 dress." I looked at Lauren. "I've been applauded for my own humiliation." Then my eyes locked with Carter's. "And I have been watched by the man who promised to love and protect me," as he smiled with pride at my pain. His face was contorting, disbelief warring with a terrible emerging truth. "They thought I was weak," I continued, my voice ringing with power. "They thought I was penniless. They were wrong. While they were busy looking down on me, I was building an empire. An empire that has now, tonight, consumed theirs." I gestured to the large screen behind me. "They believed their name and their money made them untouchable. Let's see about that." The screen flickered to life. It was Danielle's video. The entire room saw it. The sneer on Clara's face. The splash of cranberry juice. Lauren's sharp, cruel clap. And Carter's proud smile. The sound was perfect. Clara's words, "Now you look as cheap as you really are," echoed through the silent ballroom. It was damning. It was undeniable. But I was just getting started. "That was the appetizer," I said, my voice like ice. "Now for the main course." The screen changed. Financial documents appeared. Bank statements from offshore accounts. Internal emails. A detailed, irrefutable trail of Lauren's fraud, showing exactly how she had embezzled from the company and lied to her shareholders for years. Then it changed again. Clara's text messages to her lover appeared, alongside the proof of her fraudulent charity kickbacks. Her social ruin was now a matter of public record. Finally, I turned my attention to Carter. He was standing now, his body trembling, his face a mask of horror. "And then there is Carter," I said, my voice softening with mock pity. "A man who prides himself on his strength, his sterling legacy. But that legacy, like everything else about him, is built on a lie." An old, grainy police report flashed on the screen, a report that was supposed to have been destroyed. It detailed the drunk driving accident. It named Carter Sterling as the driver. It was followed by a sworn, notarized affidavit from the man who had served prison time for him, detailing the bribe and the cover-up. And finally, a recent tearful video testimony from the victim, Carter's old friend, who had finally agreed to speak the truth. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and shocked whispers. The Sterling family wasn't just ruined. They were exposed. Every lie, every crime, every dirty secret laid bare for the world to see. Carter let out a strangled cry and lunged for the stage, his face twisted with rage. "You bastard!" he screamed. Security intercepted him before he could take 2 steps. They dragged him, kicking and shouting, out of the ballroom. Lauren had fainted, slumping to the floor in a heap of designer silk. Clara was sobbing hysterically, a wreck of a woman whose world had just ended. I stood at the podium watching the chaos I had unleashed. I felt no joy, no triumph, just a vast, cold emptiness. The fire of my revenge had burned out, leaving nothing but ashes. I looked at the wreckage of their lives and said one final thing into the microphone. "The debt is paid." Then I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the ruins of the Sterling family behind me. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a new home, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The deed was in my name alone. Sterling Enterprises had been dismantled, its assets sold off. I had kept enough to ensure Danielle and I would be secure for the rest of our lives, and the rest, the vast majority of the fortune, I had placed into a trust fund. The fund was dedicated to providing legal aid and new beginnings for women and children escaping abusive situations. It was run by a board, and my only role was its anonymous benefactor. I didn't want the power or the prestige. I just wanted to turn something born of pain into a source of hope. The legal fallout for the Sterlings had been swift and brutal. Lauren and Carter were facing a slew of charges for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The cover-up of the accident had been reopened. Their assets were frozen, their names synonymous with scandal. Clara, a social pariah, had moved to a different state, trying to escape the shadow of her public disgrace. They had lost everything: their money, their reputation, their freedom. The morning sun was warm on my face. Behind me, I heard the sliding glass door open. Danielle came out carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She was smiling, her eyes bright and free of the shadows that had haunted them for so long. She handed me a mug and we stood together looking out at the sprawling city below. "It's pretty up here," she said. "Yes, it is," I agreed. We were silent for a long moment, sipping our hot chocolate. The past year felt like a lifetime ago, a dark, twisted story that had happened to someone else. The scars were still there, faint white lines on my soul, but they no longer ached. They were just a reminder of a battle I had fought and won. "Mom," Danielle said, her voice soft. "Are you happy now?" I looked down at her beautiful, resilient face, and for the first time in a very long time, the answer was simple and true. The revenge hadn't made me happy. Destroying them had brought me no peace. But this moment right here, this new life we were building brick by brick on a foundation of truth and freedom, this was everything. "Yes, my love," I said, wrapping an arm around her and pulling her close. "I really am." The sun climbed higher, flooding our balcony with light, and for the first time, it felt like a new day was truly beginning.